My name is Don. Some people call me Donnie if I see my grade school friends out here. Some people call me Reamer, like Francis over there. My brother was here, he called me Squirrely. And some people call me a pothead. I've been called just about everything everyone else has. And the main purpose of this education today is to educate people. And I think the main thing is the perception of marijuana and cannabis and all these labels that are thrown around and the fears that people have. I'm a little nervous speaking right now. But the fears, they're unjustified. What do we abuse in this country? Man, everything. And people's picture, when you talk about marijuana and medicine, they're seeing this big crowd of 1,000 people with all these joints and these kids just having a good old time. It scares the hell out of a lot of people. And they go, that's not medicine. They go, I don't want to associate with it. Well, guess what? It is medicine, but they're abusing it. We abuse everything in this country. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's been used for thousands of years, that our grandparents used it, and that it's used today. Anyhow, I've lived here since 1958. I worked at Fry's Food Stores with Fran over there for 25 years. I'm a retired truck driver, teamster. 3 years ago, I was on 5 prescription medications. I got some of my doctor's records right here, because some people say, well, where's the evidence for this stuff? I got it right here, and in my body. I'm on no prescription medications today. My PSA is quite healthy. I'm not getting up in the middle of the night going to the bathroom. In fact, I'm sleeping all through the night. Kind of upsets my wife sometimes. No more Ambien. You know, life is good. I don't think it can get much better than this. I'm truly glad to be here. I'm honored to be here to share this with. I invited my neighbors and fellow patients, of course, my wife, my friends. I'm also honored to be associated with White Mountain Dispensary. I've had a job offer over there, and I've accepted it. And not only as a patient, but as a dispensary agent. And if anyone wants information, come see me. I'll be happy to talk to you. And I'm honored the doctors and people. I haven't even met all the people I'm be working with, but so far they're extremely knowledgeable. And I'm just really glad to be here. I'm glad to be anywhere. And anyhow, what else could I say? Anyhow, no prescription drugs oh, okay, so Don, do you party with other people real well? You know, occasionally I do. And some people go, it's all good, you know, but for the most part, I'm respectable of society. I behave myself. I've never been in trouble. And I don't plan on starting now. I've done a couple TV interviews. I've been somewhat of an activist and associated with Kathy for a couple years now. And I believe that cannabis, marijuana, is God's gift to me. I believe that in my heart because of what I've experienced in my own body, because what I've seen in my wife's body. Her testimony is just about unbelievable. But it's true. And some people can't handle the truth. I hope and pray that you can all handle it today, because we got some good information coming, and I thank you.
Thank you, Don. So glad to have you. It's been so nice working with you. And speaking of being nice working with someone, as I mentioned, doctors that wouldn't come out. We've got a wonderful naturopath who's here, and she's going to go ahead and give you all kinds of great information to answer your questions. Please welcome Dr. Elaine Burns. Don't pull that thing down. All right. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm just curious, how many people here today, this is their first time coming to any kind of discussion related to medical cannabis? I'll hold it up high. Okay, good. There's a lot of new faces and to share some new information. What I hope to achieve today is to go over A little bit about the history. Kathy's mentioned it. I won't talk too much about the prohibition because Jim's going to do that. But I want to give a little bit of a history, and then really just discuss about what's the science behind it. Everyone talks about cannabis is great for pain or is anti-cancer, and they throw this around, but what's the actual science behind it or the medicine behind it? I feel as a physician that's my role. I have been working with medical marijuana patients, excuse me, since the start of the program in April of 2011. I've had the honor and pleasure of working with thousands of medical marijuana patients. And my favorite thing to do is to have, when they come back for their renewals, is to hear the incredible changes that have taken place in their lives. I mean, I'll have women, last week I had a woman in her 80s who was nearly in tears coming back for her renewal because literally she had given up and she really had no hope. And I'm not quite sure what she was going to do, but she really didn't want to live anymore. And she is completely turned around and her quality of life is just incredible. And that's a complete honor for me to be able to do that. One of the things that happens, and after talking about the science, and I'm going to talk about how to get a card, and one of the things that happens is there's a lot of physicians who are uncomfortable working with the medical marijuana population simply because and I can understand and I appreciate and honor their decisions to do that. It is illegal at a federal level, and they're concerned about their DEA, and a lot of them have medical contracts with federal programs like Medicare, and they're afraid of the repercussions for that. So there are places like Southwest Medical Marijuana Evaluation Center and others that we will focus strictly on the medical marijuana certification part and educating too. So. Basically, and it's been talked about already, that cannabis has actually been a medicine longer than it has not been a medicine. It's been around for 5,000 years, dating back to Chinese emperor who was really kind of like the first herbalist, Shenong, and he would use various herbal plants indigenous to the area, and one of them was cannabis, and it was used for pain, and that's back 5,000 years ago. Kind of jumping forward, I mean, it's been available and used in European countries and Muslim communities, in the continent of India, and actually in 1611, the English brought the cannabis crop to Jamestown, for the settlers here in the United States, and it was one of the most popular crops along with tobacco to be grown, and it was used for ropes and cloth and paper. So it had quite a vast use. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were cannabis growers. And in fact, just some interesting information, our first American flag was actually made from some hemp products from the cannabis plant, cloth from the cannabis plant. And the Declaration of Independence was written on paper that was produced from a cannabis plant. So that's kind of some interesting information. The cannabis was a medicine from 1850 to 1942, and it was in a tincture, liquid form, and you would find it in various pain-relieving medications. In fact, some of you may have, even as small children, have had your parents maybe have given it to you, or certainly your parents probably had the opportunity to use it as a medicine during that time. Then we went through prohibition, kind of fast forwarding here, and they're going to talk a little bit more about that later. That was, maybe racially and financially motivated. It's not necessarily any truth to that. Then in the 1970s, the Controlled Substance Act came along that classified cannabis as a Schedule I drug out of the hysteria and the reefer madness that occurred prior. And so Schedule I means, and this is the issue with a lot of physicians, is it means that there's no medical benefit and that it's highly addictive, along with heroin. In 1996, California was the first state to legalize medical marijuana, which, interesting enough, back in 1913, it was the first state to make it illegal. Back in the 1913s, now it's the first state to make it legal from a medical marijuana standpoint. And in 2012, Washington and Colorado were first states to legalize it recreationally. And now, in 2014, end of 2014, there's 23 states and the District of Columbia that have medical marijuana programs. And in Arizona, the report for Arizona at the end of 2014, there were 65,000 medical marijuana patients. 85 dispensaries are open and running. And I'm glad that you're all sitting down because the amount of medicine that has been sold in 2014 was 9 tons. 9 metric tons, 1.4 million transactions. You got something to look forward to over there. So there's something going on, right? I mean, people are not, you know, the naysayers say it's snake oil. Well, I don't think people would spend that kind of money and time and effort if a product wasn't working, if it really was snake oil. So there's something behind it. So what is it? What is the science? How is cannabis working? Why is it helping? And how can it help so many things? For goodness sakes, one plant can't be help with pain, help with cancer, help with PTSD and anxiety and mental emotional conditions. How can one plant do that? The pharmaceutical company is just kind of scratching their head saying it can't possibly be true. Well, I'm here to tell you about the science behind it and why it is true that the cannabis plant can have those benefits. We have our own system. It's called the endocannabinoid system. And our endocannabinoid system, which by the way, we are not the only ones that have it. Every animal has an endocannabinoid system. We actually have our own cannabinoid molecule that we make, and it's called anandamide. And anandamide is there's receptors in the body. Most of them are located in the brain, and in fact, the chemical receptors in the brain are most for anandamide. In other words, there's more receptors in the brain for anandamide or endocannabinoid than there are for serotonin and GABA and norepinephrine and all the other acetylcholine, all the other brain chemical messengers. There's more endocannabinoid receptors than those. And then they're also located in the organs and our immune system. So it's located throughout the body. The purpose of sorry, there's a fly. The purpose, a gnat actually. The purpose of the is that, as a side note, it's kind of funny. You see these people walking down the street, all of a sudden they start freaking out. Because in a spider web or something, they're like, what's going on with that person? There's a gnat here, I'm not freaking out. The purpose, what's the purpose of our endocannabinoid system? Well, it's been kind of whittled down to these things. The purpose of anandamide, and it's created on demand, and it's quickly broken down in our system, so it's very difficult to capture, test, and quantify. But basically, it's to help us relax, to eat, to sleep, to forget, and to protect. And I'll kind of go over each one of those related to the medical conditions that it's helping. For example, there's a lot in the news now about the anti-cancer effects of the cannabis plant, which, by the way, is a phytocannabinoid. So in other words, we have anandamide, which is our own endogenous cannabinoid that we make. The plant, the cannabis, and this is its claim to fame, is a phytocannabinoid, and its chemical composition exactly matches our endocannabinoid system like a lock and a key. It fits naturally. The anti-cancer effects, for example, anandamide, one of its things for anti-cancer that's been shown that it does, and if you can think about life before the Industrial Revolution, where we didn't have a lot of chemicals in our environment and in our food, what would happen is we have, basically cancer is our normal cells that forget to die. So when, the natural death of a normal cell is called apoptosis. And anandamide basically was around to keep that in check. Every once in a while, there'd be some normal cells that would get out of control and get rowdy. It's kind of like our body's bouncer. And it would come in and it would check those normal cells that were growing abnormally and not dying, and it would force this death or apoptosis with these cells. But what happens, and it also would cut off the blood supply, because in order for a cell to divide, it needs to have the blood to do that. And that's what a cancer cell is. It's a normal cell that's gone crazy. Well, what happens is after the Industrial Revolution, our burden, our chemical burden on our body has just gone up vastly. I mean, in the environment, food, water, I mean, we don't, that's a whole other discussion. And so the burden on our endocannabinoid system has completely caused a breakdown and overwhelmed, and it just cannot keep up. But that was the original intention. And so the anti-cancer effects they're looking at right now is using a phytocannabinoid, cannabis plant, anti-cancer for its apoptosis, and it cuts off the blood supply to the tumor. And that's really how it's working. And it just mimics our own anandamide that we had that we're low in now, or it's burdened. We just can't keep up with it because of the environmental onslaught. The other thing related to forgetting, PTSD, which, by the way, was just added as a qualifying condition January 1 of this year, which anxiety, depression, those kinds of things, we all know that it does help with mood, anxiety. Well, what happens is it helps us to forget. So that's another thing. So anandamide, our own chemical that we produce, helps us forget. And it actually is just as important for us to forget as it is for us to recall. If you were to remember everything that happened to you in your life, every scratch, bruise from a pain standpoint, or every person that you met in a room, everything I said today, even though it's important, it would become overwhelming, and literally our minds would bust. So we actually have a protective system in place, selective amnesia. So PTSD, anxiety, thoughts going over and over in your head, can't turn off a traumatic event because it's being played over and relived, is because they're low on their anandamide. It's not working properly, so they need an exogenous or an outside source, which is the phytocannabinoid from the cannabis plant, to help supplement this deficiency that exists. No one different than if someone has a low thyroid condition, or someone has a low testosterone condition, or anything that's supplemented because there's low. Basically, it's a hypoendocannabinoid condition, and so the phytocannabinoid helps to supplement that. With regard to pain, same thing. Pain is, the amnesia effect of forgetting pain, and that's the number one thing that patients report to me when they come in for their renewals and how is it going with their pain. Of course, they're able to get off their narcotics, and that's definitely an important result. But they always describe it as they forget they have pain. And they didn't know anything about the endocannabinoid system and the selective amnesia, but that is the actual word they use. They forget they have pain. And that's exactly what it's doing. And that's what our own anandamide does, and that's what the phytocannabinoid does. It helps us to forget. It's also, the properties of cannabis are also anti-inflammatory and protect nerves. So that's all contributing to this pain reduction that's going on, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. The other thing it does, a lot of people, it does affect the immune system, but it doesn't increase our immune system, it actually downregulates our immune system. It tampers down our immune system. So that's why it's great for autoimmune conditions, which autoimmune conditions, again, like those cancer cells, it's our immune system is running amok and it's overworking, and so the cannabis works really well for autoimmune conditions, like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, even MS, those kinds of things, because it's helping to downregulate the immune system. So as I mentioned, all of this, those are the benefits and the reasons